Now, we heard a defense attorney at today's hearing say she was worried people wouldn't testify truthfully if these court proceedings were open up. Meanwhile, the assembly member says, look, this has already happened in 17 states. They've made these changes, and he says so far, no children have been harmed.
We're here at the state capitol in Sacramento to go to a hearing on the opening of juvenile dependency courts, which would allow for transparency in the foster care system. As a journalist and as somebody who supports journalists, and as a project fostering media connections that supports journalists, having those dependency courts open is very critical to being able to tell the full story, the good and the bad, of the foster care system. So this is a big deal. We got some big players here to talk about this issue.
Whenever the public's attention is drawn to the operational shortcomings of California's foster care system, the result can be very good things for large numbers of California's foster children. And this is entirely unsurprising. This is how our system works. This is in part why we all seek press attention for our bills. All reform efforts in our history have been, at least in part, impelled by press reports revealing a problem that the public didn't otherwise know previously existed. And foster care is no different.
I think there is a lot of evidence to demonstrate that publicity for children is dangerous. And let's look at the press. There are certain newspapers in America, like the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which in the past has said it has a policy of publishing children's identities. Let's also look at the media ethics codes in America. I've been doing a study for a year and a half of media ethics codes. There isn't one media resource in America that has a media ethics code that prohibits the publication of identifying information about children who are non-sexually physically abused and or emotionally abused. Why would we expect them, when they're not trained to delete this information, for not including it in their studies?
Did you see any evidence from your experience leading the Minnesota court system of harm to kids from opening the courts?
No. The short answer is no. Apparently there was one case along the way where a child's name, we're talking thousands of cases, apparently got in the paper, but what she told me in this email, and I didn't call her about it, was that there was a companion case that was in another court where that material could have gotten from. And reporters shouldn't do that, and they don't do it usually.
The big question that really needs to be considered is whether children will be harmed by opening dependency courts. The reports from both Minnesota and Arizona indicate that there was no harm. And you heard from the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice of Minnesota, here today. In June of 1997, Chief Justice Judith Kaye opened New York's courts. 4 years later, she was quoted in all newspapers, coincidentally, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, on this. She said this, quote, "Everyone complains about everything in New York. Is there anything they are not up in arms about? But we've had no complaints about this." And she said she had not received one allegation that a child had been harmed by open hearings. I have not heard that either, even though our courts in Los Angeles are often opened for a variety of legitimate reasons.
Right, but I mean, has CYC taken a position at all?
We haven't taken a position yet. We were waiting until after the hearing to see if there was new information presented. Right now, our youth have been discussing it, and there's some really polar opposite opinions.
There are definitely a lot of different ramifications. How do you balance the potential deleterious effects with that need to know?
Well, I mean, I think, as a journalist, I think it's, and you're a journalist too, I think it's our compulsion to ensure that we protect those people that are the characters in our stories. So if we can't take that responsibility as journalists ourselves, there's something wrong with us as a class.